And Nikki, I'm glad that this is Nicole Breaden running for House State Representative seat for the 43rd District. I'm glad that you were hanging out with us up until now to hear kind of generally kind of information we typically have on the show. It is kind of cannabis based, although I know that you're campaigning on behalf of many more issues than that. I know that you generally are in support of rights when it comes to cannabis and that type of thing. So you can expound on that as much as you'd like to, but I just want to point out before I turn it over to you that you did campaign in the last cycle and didn't win, but you got kind of initiated into this process, and there was a lot of people. It seems like a lot of success with a lot of women, running in races to offer a change in direction that people were desperately needing, especially after the 2016 election. And now you're running this time around, and everything seems really elevated now, and the need for that type of change, and many people kind of disgruntled in the Trump world. Of course, there's the base that sticks no matter what, but some of the fence people just going, this is getting too ridiculous. We need change in direction. And you're making the rounds really well. There's a really impressive list of endorsements that are going on. It just looks really good. So I hope you can let us know how you're feeling about that and what it looks like now, given this new world in an area that would be normally really difficult for you to probably fare well. But please introduce yourself to us and let us know what you're campaigning on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Jamie, you touched on that I did run in 2018. The Michigan House Caucus made a concerted effort to make sure they had a Democrat in every seat in all 110 district house, every House district. There's 110. And I was a last minute recruit. This was never on my to-do list in life. I did get involved in politics after the 2016 election when I realized that voting was not enough. I've always voted progressively. I've always had progressive ideas about how our lives should be. And I led and created an indivisible group up in North Oakland County. And our main objective was to get Mike Bishop out of office. We succeeded. We now have Alyssa Slotkin. And then, so spring of 2018, before she was elected, I was called and they said, we need somebody to run in the 43rd seat. My husband actually was the final nudge for me to agree to it because I had no idea what it would be like to run a campaign. I had been a volunteer on both Alyssa Slotkin's campaign and my now state senator Rosemary Bear's campaign. So I had like a touch of what was like to be involved in a campaign, let alone run my own. But we got to work. We started knocking doors. We knocked on 7,600 doors in just a few months, and that was quite an impact. We got the attention of Michigan Republicans. They turned around and spent $250,000 to take me down. And so we definitely made it onto the map. I say we because we are a campaign. It's not me. It's us. It's us because I couldn't do this alone. And before the election was over, I did decide to run again just because I felt like I didn't have much of a chance to get ready for the 2018 campaign. It's been a long journey. I'm feeling the fatigue of being a candidate for nearly, it's going on 3 years now. And it is tiring, it's exhausting, but I know the ropes a little better this time. It's been in this pandemic has certainly thrown a giant wrench in any kind of campaign plan anyone might have, because to be successful and win, you need lots of money and you have to knock on a lot of doors. And this pandemic has kind of diluted both of those, and in fact, it eliminated the ability to knock on doors. And that's where I really shined. I knocked on lots of doors leading up to the pandemic. In fact, we got to work the weekend before the first case arrived in Michigan, and we knocked on 940 doors in one weekend. And we were hoping to keep up with that momentum. But of course, the day of our presidential primary, our first case showed up. Actually, I think it was 2 cases showed up in Oakland County, and therefore everything spiraled downward from there. I had to cancel 5 fundraisers. So there's the money that, is needed to run a campaign. The caucus really jockeys you against other candidates. They not so much judge, but they definitely rank us. And so my race is considered a tier 2. The tier 1 races are the 38th district in Novi, the 39th in the Commerce West Bloomfield area, the 45th in the Rochester Hills area. I'm just looking at Oakland County races because those are the ones I'm familiar with. I know there's some, the 104th up in Traverse City. Those are more tier 1. But the fact that I'm a tier, I'm pretty proud of that. And Jamie was right. In 2018, we advanced Democratic turnout by, well, not turnout, but voters by 8.5%. So we went from 35% Democrat votes to 43.5%. So this time around, it's definitely within reach with some hard work. Our president is making it a little bit easier for us. Michigan Republicans have certainly made it easier for us. Their response to the governor's executive orders and her shutdown orders. I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. Michigan is doing extremely well when it comes to cases and deaths. And I think she deserves a round of applause for her leadership and making those hard decisions that we're all safer for it. Whether Republicans want to be disgruntled about it, go for it. She's a strong woman. She can handle it. But I think I feel safer today because of her direction. So some of the endorsements I have received, some of the ones you might be more familiar with are, I did receive the endorsement of the Young Democrats of Michigan. And I just received the endorsement of the Progressive Caucus of the Michigan Democrat Party. I've not announced that one yet, so I'm getting ready to announce that one. And then I've received many endorsements from labor unions already, which is really important as a Democrat. We need labor support to be elected. We need their money. We need their manpower. We need their support. They need to send out our names to their memberships because Oakland County has a lot of union members that live there. In my district is made up of Waterford Township, Independence Township, and Clarkston. So it's northern/central Oakland County, and it has been a Republican stronghold for over 40 years. So it would be an historical flip if I managed to make it across the finish line as victorious. And what else? Oh, there is some movement when it comes to cannabis. I've actually kept my eye out for a different movement in my area of the woods. It is not legal. There are no dispensaries in my district anywhere. But I did sit through a couple municipal meetings, like the city of Clarkston, the village of the city. Is it the city of the village of Clarkston or whatever? It's downtown Clarkston. It's
a village, yeah.
Right, but it's also a city. It's like the village of the city. It's a city of the village Clarkston. It's this bizarre.
What part is downtown? Right.
It isn't. There's like 950 people that live there. So there was a business called Pleasant Trees that came and gave their proposal of opening a medicinal dispensary in downtown, and I thought they did a great job. They described it as a boutique dispensary, and I think they did a great job. And the response in town that I saw was mixed. It was like 50-50. And what I thought was the most compelling moment was when someone had stood up and said, remember when somebody wanted to open a bar in a church and everyone went crazy, and now that is a Union Joints, which is one of the most successful Michigan-based restaurant chains in the state. So I think change is tough. Change is hard for some people, but I think just talking about it in that community, I think was really important. And then Waterford, there's been even more gains. I sat through a board of trustees meeting, and they were offering open like public comment, and 15 different people stood up, and 14 out of 15 were in support. The state overwhelmingly voted for it, so it makes sense that a community like Waterford would want it. And it's not only just for the medicine, but it's for the revenue. Revenue sharing is down so much in Michigan over the last 2 decades. Our communities like Waterford are hurting because of the lack of revenue sharing. They don't have a downtown area, they are a township. So they rely on revenue sharing for their communities. And I think Waterford would be a prime place. And they just had another Zoom trustee meeting recently, and it looks like they've made even more segue. So it is moving up here, and I've been in touch with those who are invested in opening dispensaries in the area. And I'm a lay person when it comes to this whole industry, so forgive me if I'm not using the right language. Zara, you guys have talked about Zara. I know she's the vice chair of the Cannabis Caucus. She's a volunteer on my campaign. So I'm getting support from the movement. And also in 2018, Michigan Liberation did knock doors for me. Organizations they cannot coordinate with a candidate. So I didn't know until after the fact. And I was very honored that they picked my campaign as somebody that they felt stood up for, some of the problems with our criminal justice system. I'm supportive of reform. You're talking about expungement. I think we definitely need to get people out of prison that are serving time for these crimes that really are not, they don't compare to the time that they're serving. There are women that are serving in Huron Valley for drug charges that shouldn't be there. I think having some stronger criminal justice candidates or electeds in the state house would make a huge difference, because our prison system is so expensive. We spend so much money on keeping people behind bars when they could be reformed. They could be out making money, paying their taxes, and living their lives. Yeah, you guys have an ally in me. If elected, please you stay in touch with me and let me know how I can help. Let me see. I was taking down notes. That's about it.
How can people reach your campaign? How could they donate? How could they volunteer?
Yes, I have a website. It's Vote Nicole Breaden, and right there's my name. Nope. So just add vote in front of it. And .com. You can Google me. My website comes right up, and you can there's forms to volunteer. There's definitely a form to donate, and donations are very, very welcomed. Right now, it's more challenging to make the calls to ask for money because you don't know how people are feeling economically. Everything is so uncertain for the future, and to donate to a campaign is it's hard to ask, and so if anyone is able, it's very welcomed. Thank you for the plug.
Absolutely. So, you don't mind hanging out and discussing some stuff for a minute or two?
Nope.
So it's been talked about a couple times in a couple different ways here, the concept of descheduling cannabis. It was talked about on a federal level, but we have a controlled substances list in Michigan, and cannabis exists on it still as a Schedule 1 drug, with the concept that it has no medicinal value, that it's very addictive, dangerous, all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, we've not only made it legal medically many years ago, and then made a commercial system. It is completely legal now. And during the course of the commercial system emerging, the state allowed caregivers to contribute to inventory in order to keep things moving before cultivation centers could get up and running, and without a lot of parameters. And caregivers, fortunately, because it did keep things going and they produced really good cannabis, would put their harvest in their car or vehicle and drive it to the appropriate place and bring it into the system. That ends for flower September 30th, I believe, actually. But the point is, that's not how we treat a controlled substance, and especially not in not a Schedule 1, and that is associated with a lot of penalties and things. For example, we talked about earlier the pilot program of the 5-county roadside swab test has now been expanded to statewide, and a lot of lawmakers voted against it, which I'm happy about, because it doesn't really seem to make sense. It doesn't really seem to be very scientific, but cannabis is included in all of that. And it's included in all that because it's connected to controlled substances. And it's just inappropriate and creates other, potential harms for people. So there is a couple things going on. One is there's a lawsuit, which is running into a couple of issues, and it's based on before the MRTMA came into existence, and based mainly on the just MMMA and the change in laws that way, suing the Board of Pharmacy, which is an organization that could deschedule cannabis or take it off or move it, and with a group of defendants, and that's in the Court of Claims or the Court of Appeals at the moment. And I think that's going to discuss a little bit more on planting green trees too, and then it can be done legislatively too. And I had a discussion with a couple lawmakers, most recently with the Representative Robbie, about introducing something that would, take care of that. In other states, like those types of conflicts in law are made harmonious just by a matter of course, but we don't do that here. So it maintains some issues for CPS issues and other things. It's connected to a bunch of serious penalties because it's on the controlled substances list, and we legalized it. It's not appropriate that it's there anymore. That's just something that should have been taken care of by now, in my opinion. But
just another reason for people to distrust government, because they embrace a lie.
Yeah. So anyway, when that comes up, hopefully when you're in session with everybody, that there might be more work to do. There may be subsequent legislation that has to fill in some of the gaps created by doing that, which is fine. But that needs to happen. So I hope that you're in support of that.
If Democrats take over the state house, unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of work to do. I mean, I know that there are pending issues. I know that repeal the right to work law is probably one of the first things that need to be done, and then bring back the prevailing wage. Those are issues that I am definitely fighting for. I think working people deserve more money. We know that it's evident that people don't make enough money when they're on unemployment, and they make more money on unemployment than they do with their wages. We know that something's wrong with our wage system, and we have to make sure people can pay for the basic necessities. But it's unfortunate that we have so many things to unravel that Republicans have done over the last decade. So I hope that there's enough time in the day to get all of these things amended. And I think it is absurd that cannabis is still a Scheduled I drug. It just doesn't make any sense, especially if it's legal recreationally. How can that be? But I guess I am dumbfounded how that wasn't.
It's one of those remnants from a time long past.
Yeah, and I hope that this might not be the first, but definitely get used to ill logic in the legislature.
Yeah.
Something we warn every potential activist who wants to go up there and give the information to the decision makers and overcome all the objections and everything. And the whole system doesn't work exactly as black and white as that. And so don't be too surprised when something doesn't make sense, but is anyway.
There's a lot of things that don't make any sense,
right.
But yet they're there. So the fact that women still in Michigan don't have the right to make decisions on their own bodies. We have an old law on the books that still exists that we can't make our own decisions about reproductive futures about, and so that definitely can fit in that category of things that don't make any sense.
When Rick Snyder first came into office, he made a really big deal about wiping out a bunch of old laws that didn't make any sense. And I remember that he proudly proclaimed that they had wiped out like a dozen laws governing the construction of outhouses. And his declaration that they had done all of this work for this really minuscule and unimportant issue just put in a broad focus all the huge glaring issues that he completely ignored as far as taking care of wiping out some of those old things.
Well, and then he did a good job of ushering in new laws on his way out. Like the one that just really is a thorn in my side is that Michigan can't have any environmental protections that are more strict than the federal government. There's something very wrong with that when we are, we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, and we should have a higher standards than states like Kansas, who don't have 20% of the world's fresh water surrounding it. It's just ridiculous. And that was signed into law right as he was on his way out the door during the lame duck session. And that, I know that would be another piece of legislation that would be, there was already a bill introduced to repeal that, but I just looked today and it's still sitting in committee from March of 2019. So we have a lot of work to do, and hopefully, I know that as Democrats, we can walk and chew gum, and if we have to go 5 days a week, I know that we will have to unravel a lot of mess. because Michigan is, we hold the rankings in terrible, terrible things. We're like one of the best states for the lack of business taxes, and we're at the bottom for education and infrastructure, and
Legislative integrity is down in the hole, right?
Yes.
Government transparency.
It's corrupted.
Yes.
I want to lay one more on you while we're kind of in this zone before we see what we're going to discuss next. But there is a group of bills that are include some expungement, and one of them centers in on cannabis, kind of a thing. And it does say that it will apply to the things that were made legal by the MRTMA. But in practice, it really does not, because it stops short of recognizing and being able to actually apply all the things that MRTMA now permits, which is for an adult can grow or produce or manufacture cannabis in their own home, can possess it, can travel around with it, can take it over to somebody else and can hand it over to them. But if the person did have a pass that included manufacturing, possession, and intent to delivery, that somehow doesn't qualify for expungement. I know Senator Irwin is working on that issue, and this package of bills is better than conditions that exist right now, and it might take a better composition of lawmakers to fix this, and we've discussed that on this show before too. So that's something to look out for, and it might be you in the next session being amidst the better composition of lawmakers fixing that stuff.
Fingers crossed. I think we're going to take a majority no matter what, whether I win or not. I think it's time. I think people are fed up. I don't think people cared for the response that Michigan Republicans had to the stay-at-home orders and the support of events like Operation Gridlock that blocked ambulances from getting to Sparrow Hospital. And there was proof of coronavirus spread back to northern and western communities after those events. So I think Democrats have a very, very good shot of taking the House. I hope I go with them, but if not, I think it's going to be done. And then next we turn our eyes towards the state Senate so we can have a trifecta finally in the state, because Republicans have led and had held leadership in the state for so long that, things like being last and transparency in government is nothing to brag about here in Michigan. So I think we have a very good shot, and definitely count me in on some of these reforms. And I rely on your expertise to explain some of these laws, because when I was going through the Progressive Caucus's endorsement questionnaire, there was a huge section on the medical marijuana laws in Michigan. And I was overwhelmed just trying to dig into it and just to answer the questions. So I have a lot to learn. And I'm happy that I know you guys to help put it in some easier terms, because as lawmakers, I'm not a lawmaker, as a lawmaker wannabe, you have to know a little bit about everything. And so it's hard to get in the weeds, pun intended, about things like a newer law like this that obviously it's not perfect right now. And hopefully we can get to the point that it's more clear. Hopefully we can make some good money that we need in this state. Like I said, bringing it back to my own district, I know Waterford Township could really benefit from some of the revenue. People are driving to Walled Lake, or they're going to Flint, or they're going to Ann Arbor, or Detroit, when they could be buying medicine right in their own community. And I think Waterford is starting to wake up, but hopefully a change of leadership in that township will also make a difference.
A question for you. Do you have 10th and the 11th district working hard to bring people into the district and provide you some more volunteers?
Kent has his hands very full, because he is trying to get Haley Stevens reelected. That's his main objective. But he was the chair of the Waterford Dems, now he's the vice chair, but he's also, because we've had to move to online meetings and stuff, the current chair, she's in a age bracket that really is not comfortable running a Zoom meeting, so he's running the meeting. So he's got his hands really, really full. I know he's he's doing a great job, I think, for what he's, for all the responsibility he has. But I know that he is really working hard in Waterford. There's a new organization. It's very, very grassroots, and it's addressing the racism in Waterford. And I think that is going to make an impact in that community. There's
liberation. It could be a doorway, and from that doorway, and my help from the Democrats, maybe we can help people who near your district or within reasonable drive to volunteer some phone banking or write a check.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, they're not allowed to coordinate with candidates. That's why Michigan Liberation did knock on doors in the 15th precinct of Waterford Township, but I was not allowed to know that they were doing that. That's you cannot coordinate. So I was, like I said, I was honored to find out after the fact.
So Mike in Pontiac.
Oh, Mike Jackson?
No, Mike who's running for city council. McGinnis.
Yeah.
Mike McGinnis. Or at least anyone in the North County that can help you, including one of the Democratic clubs nearby, besides Waterford.
Well, I do belong to the North Oakland Democratic Club, but the chair is also running for the state house. So that kind of spreads that help kind of thin. So actually, the surrounding indivisible groups have been very helpful. The Fighting Nine, the 9th Congressional District and 11th District, they've been very, very helpful. Huron Valley Indivisible, they're also a very strong group. So I'm getting help from outside organizations. Like Indivisible.
You could convert some of the Archie Bunker voters of my generation in your district. You could possibly win with a big blue wave from top to bottom of the ticket. We used to have a slogan: you can have straight voting. Make it emphatic, vote straight Democratic.
Yeah.
So we could oust Bouchard with Vince Gregory, a former Wayne County sheriff, opposing Bouchard. We could beat his brand recognition or the habits of incumbent Republicans in Waterford. We could pull them under with our blue wave from the top of the ticket. So you have more of a chance of an upset because people will repudiate Republican Party, not just repudiate Trump, but repudiate the Republican Party, break ranks. One time I repudiated the Democratic Party. I was against the Vietnam War, and I voted third party in 1968 because Humphrey continued to support the Vietnam War. So there might be some deal breakers for some seniors up there. Is Trump willing to sacrifice everybody over 50 for his reelection? Is he willing to use us as collateral damage of the pandemic that he deliberately suppressed for 60 to 90 days, threatening my life? Is he out to throw me under the bus literally 10 years before I'll die? I'm pissed off. Maybe you can get some Archie Bunker people up in Waterford to let go of their redneck instincts and vote for a beautiful progressive woman.
Well, if Trump tries to throw you under the bus, just run away, because he can only get 2 or 3 steps before he passes out from exhaustion. So
yeah, he didn't do too well on the ramp the other day.
I noticed that.
Well, it's strange. Waterford Township, because like the way I check the temperature in Waterford is I follow their community Facebook pages, and there is a pretty strong anti-Trump sentiment rumbling through there, which is really surprising. But there is also an anti-Gretchen Whitmer sentiment as well. For some reason, they just couldn't get on board with some of her precautions. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I know that we are phone banking. So if anyone is interested in phone banking, that's about the only voter reach that's available right now. You can go to my campaign and fill out the volunteer form, and we have virtual. You can phone bank straight from home. We have Zoom. We gather on a Zoom meeting, and then we make calls together, and we share funny ideas. Like one of the funniest stories I came across when I phone banked on Sunday was I asked, typically when you ask a voter, like, what is their most important issue? And her most important issue was to make sure that those monuments stay up. So I found myself a strong racist right there in Waterford, but you never know. It's a mixed bag, and then you get a supporter for the next call. So it's interesting what people find important. The fact that we keep these Civil War monuments up isn't a most important thing to somebody. I found incredibly interesting, but it's a mixed bag down there. So
you can still have the Civil War going. We call it the cultural wars.
Forget hell.
This is the up south.
The up south, yeah.
We're with Union forces. They're safe with us.
Yeah. Well, it is true that some of the past continues to haunt us. We are always shaped by who we have been. America, as less than 300 years old, really still hasn't discovered its identity. If you look at European nations that have been continually occupied for thousands of years, they've worked through a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, and they have a much more sedate culture. Their culture is much more abiding in most instances. So we're bravely walking into this very difficult time right now. And what's more brave than being alive now is trying to be a leader right now. So Nicole, thank you very much for trying to be one of those people that shapes a future in the way that we believe it should be.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on today. I'm a big fan of Jamie Lowell. He, when I was Indivisible Leader, he came up and talked to our membership about Prop 1, and he gave a great presentation. And I think you came to the North Oakland Democratic Club, and I had something else going on that night, and I missed your presentation that night.
I did, and Rick did it. Rick basically took over on that one and did a great job. That was in Oxford.
Jamie Lowell
downtown
has
Oxford.
a huge following, and just an enormous following for Jamie Lowell.
It's not easy being Jamie, that's for sure.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, but Jamie and I were in a quartet, a Hawaiian band quartet with our spouses.
Yes, we've heard tales. We have heard the tales. We've seen the ukulele and everything. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And the organ.
And the organ. Well, the organ comes without saying. So.
And those dogs are the best dogs. So if you hop the fence and play with the dogs, they are the best dogs. So
yes.
We know the dogs. The dogs are good.
They're so teeny.
There's the one. There's our favorite.
That's the one I haven't met. That's the one I've met.
Hopefully soon.
Everything,
all the numbers stay looking good. We're moving forward and do more stuff.
Lady Zeta.
So Nikki, you're welcome to stay. I really appreciate you sharing and stumping here today, and hopefully you get some donations or some volunteers or some awareness at the very least. And I do hope that you do a historic unseating of the 40-year stronghold on this seat. That would be quite awesome.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Is anyone nervous of hold on. Is anyone nervous of what will happen if Trump does lose? When he loses?
Yes, we've talked about whether he will willingly leave the White House or whether he will claim that it was election fraud of somehow and that he has to push back another election and he must remain in charge until then. There has been a lot of speculation about that.
I don't even think he'll do something like I think even he, come on.
I'm worried about his supporters more than I live in a precinct where Democrats are outvoted 2-1. And so I'm a little nervous of where I live and north of me of the reaction to his loss. So
are they going to do some burning and looting out there?
Be like
Downtown
English hooligans
Clarkston,
after a bad football game. Yeah. Look, we saw in London some of the monuments to people associated with slavery in the colonial time damaged. We saw the statue of Nelson Mandela, the symbol of African-American freedom and success in the face of despair. That was threatened. They were African. Well, you're right. Correct. Not African-American. That's right. Yeah, just African. But
South Africa.
A lot of folks turned up to try and assault that thing, and they were really
in Germany too,
and armed. And this is in London, So there's definitely a counter movement.
Just a little side note. And Nelson Mandela actually spoke in Detroit. He came to Tiger Stadium like a week after he was released. I was there and I took my kids.
I totally remember that.
What a moment. I mean, what a moment. I just got chills thinking about it.
I have the book A Long Walk Home. It's an impressive read.
Yeah, he's an incredible man.
So, just as a transition here, Nick, you might want to hang out for a second because there is some future connection to a discussion that we're going to have with Colin. Sometimes you step into the legislature for a long haul and ride like a new issue that comes out that requires several years of influence from lobbyists and who pays who and who influences who and all that kind of stuff. And some people are needed to champion these causes. We didn't end up being the best friends with them, but Representative Colton took on the cannabis issue, and originally with our organization early on, that changed hands several times via politics and all these various factors that go into lawmaking.
It's for gluttonous self-benefit on his point.
Yeah, but one of the next things that could happen is the legalization of things such as like mushrooms, psilocybin, and other things. And right now, Colin is with an organization called Decriminalize Nature, and they are working on it locally in Ann Arbor, and that's how statewide the cannabis laws statewide happened. The first few cities went, individually had initiatives and won by big majorities for like making it medical or for legalizing in some way or lowest level law enforcement. And now the issue of the well, he'll tell you. I keep on screwing up the name. The ethnocentric.
No, entheogenic.
There you go. Whatever. Take it
is
away,
the
man.
word, okay?
Give her a little insight on what's going on in Ann Arbor, so she can get an idea of what may coming at her statewide after she's in the legislature for a little
All right,
bit.
for one, you don't have to answer any questions. I know you're a candidate, and there's probably not a stance in the Democratic Party, and your area is unaffected at this time. So, but I work with Jim Salame was on the call earlier, and Julie Barron. We started a committee to decriminalize nature, which is entheogenic plants and fungi in Michigan. Or not in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor. And so we're working with the city council right now to try and get that passed. It's first started in the city of Oakland, California, and Santa Cruz, California passed ordinance, and same with Berkeley, California. And there's ongoing, like, similar ballot committees across the country. I know
Denver and Chicago too, right?
Well, Denver passed like to legalize psychedelic mushrooms, but like Washington D.C. is going to be voting on it in November, and there's Portland, Oregon, and it's made its way through a committee in the city of Chicago. So it's just trying to make it lowest law enforcement priority, similar to like what we kind of did in the cannabis world. We started in cities like Ann Arbor and Detroit, and moved across like Kalamazoo and Lansing.
Ypsilanti, Ferndale, Traverse City, Detroit.
Yeah, all of them. And Deb did a bunch in Oakland County near you. But yeah, it's just something that we're trying to make not a crime that like what we were like similar to cannabis. We don't want people going to jail for it or being charged with like a Schedule 1 substance for using something that could potentially be okay for them, or not typically harm them too hard to like at all. I mean, there's times where people do have bad trips, but for the most part, most people have good. And if you responsibly use it,
it's safe physically. The harm would be like doing something weird while having a weird trip, and that would be the problem. Right. Okay. So a lot of people should do something like that under more of a controlled environment, and some of the people who he works with offer that.
Like you wouldn't want to drive under the influence of mushrooms or anything.
Exactly. Right. You need to be responsible about those types of realities.
Stuff like that.
Right. And but really, your first experience shouldn't be by yourself.
I mean, most people like don't really understand how to use mushrooms properly, and if they could just the community could create harm reduction methods of setting with a therapist, because a lot of people can use them for healing. I know that there's a lot going on with post-traumatic stress disorder right now, and the different types of psychedelics that are used for that, and different issues like cluster headaches and migraines, and yeah. But yeah, it's
really cool. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I saw a TV show where people took LSD, and then they were in a very safe environment, and then they had therapists on hand to kind of work through some of their traumas that they've experienced in life. And I thought it was really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, And I think it's going to be like one of the next bigger things in mental health therapy, and it's coming. I don't think it's going to be like this year, but like in the next couple of years, there's probably going to be a lot more people talking about it. But I've also been talking with a lot of different state house representatives or candidates throughout. Like I'm from like Wayne County, so I talked to like Abdullah Hamoud. There's a candidate out in Canton. His name's Ranjiv Puri. I think he's in the 11th district too. Talked to him about psychedelics, and of course Jeff Irwin and Yusuf Rabi and everyone out there. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Rep. Rabi. I very much support his Medicaid for All bill. Like, 'cause I get asked a lot, do you support Medicare for All? And my response is always that I support Representative Rabi's Medicaid for All bill, because that would be one I could vote on, not Medicare for All. So that seems to satisfy that question. But I think he's amazing, and he is a great representative, and I think there's big things ahead for him beyond the state legislature.
Well, and of course, Rep. Rabi stepped into the district that formerly was occupied by current Senator Jeff Irwin. So it certainly looks like that's a district he could hold for 3 consecutive terms, you know?
Yeah. He tells a great story when he ran for county commission, and he won by like a handful of votes. So he's a great leader in that area. So you guys are lucky to, whoever has him, they're lucky.
Yeah. He's a good communicator.
I'm not in his district, but he's been quite awesome about communicating with me and discussing serious strategies on issues and things like that. And we're happy to have him in the state working in the legislature for sure.
Rep. Rabi's spoken at my Michigan Cannabis Business Development conferences. Jamie and I host those, and he's spoken several times there. He's been on our radio show frequently. He's very candid. Whenever there's a new topic that comes up that we need to get the scoop on, he's available to us. And for a lot of times in our career, we had a lot of legislators who were making decisions and had influence that were not available to us, who we could never get on the phone, that would never wish to speak on their behalf. I think the whole concept that cannabis was this poison pill. Once you said yes, I like the idea of cannabis law reform, somehow you were tainted in the minds of your electorate. I hope to gosh that is gone now.
Same. Right. Yeah. It's like Jamie said, I'm a big supporter. It's just something I can't lead with.
Yeah. Oh.
Can't run at it.
Well, you just said you have a district that's predominantly Republican, and recognizing that that's a touchstone issue that's not got a lot of agreement amongst that particular group means it shouldn't be something that you lead with. No.
Right. And during the conversation, though, there has been some activity going on. There has been a lot of jobs created. There has not been a lot of issues at large with kids getting it or whatever the common concerns have been. So you can point out some things if you're able to get that far in a discussion.
And just talk money. There's revenue to be made.
I know. Well, every time a car leaves Oakland County to come up to Flint to buy some cannabis, or it leaves Oakland County to go to Wayne County to buy some cannabis, because they can legitimately do it in those places, your community loses. And I know they hate to see people spending their money outside the city. That's a really big, powerful motivator. Jamie and I traveled across the state, for 2 separate campaigns for legalization. And we've spoken to, I don't know, at least 100 different local municipalities over that time. And, money talks. People really appreciate jobs, money, and public health.
And access. I mean, why, those who don't have a car, if they don't have the ability to get to Flint because mass transit is nowhere near their home, how do they get access to their medicine? I know, like right now, you can have things delivered because we have coronavirus around us, but before that arrived, I don't know, was there a delivery service before that, or would they deliver to Oakland County from Flint or Detroit, or,
well,
yes, but it has just up and running and not necessarily functional in all areas. And
when you want to shop, you want to be able to talk to the the employee there and find out what is the best medicine for you. So having that resource in your community makes the most sense. And I hope that Waterford does wake up, because it would be a prime community for it. I mean, it's been there forever, and why not make money off of it, and why not provide a service to those who need it? Like I said, 14 out of 15. And the one person who stood up said he did all the talking points, like it can cause rage issues and all of this nonsense that we know is not true. But 14 out of 15 people stood up and said they wanted it. And it was more like for seizures and for anxiety. It was truly for medicine. I mean, and people want it in their community. They don't want it. They want to spend their money in their town.
They've been driving by Jerry Millen's greenhouse. They've been driving by Iron Labs. They've been driving by cannabis functioning facilities now for some time. And that really does sort of dispel some of the illusions that people may have had about the nature of the cannabis industry. You know, it worked to Bill Schuette's advantage when he painted us as all pot shops where, you know, nefarious things took place, and you would never let your daughter go into one of those pot shops because you know what probably happens behind those walls. Well, nowadays people have actually seen it in their community for quite some time. They've seen no issues with it, and there have been intelligent people representing the community interviewed by media regularly. So the impression they're getting from the industry, I'm hoping, is not one of fear. It's one of acceptance. These industries are legitimately just like any other.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jamie, what do you got there?
Well, we kind of got off track a little bit on that event in a minute. Colin at least will tell us about this event that's coming up on Saturday, you know, for the DNA. But I just wanted to point out too, like, it seems as though because of that big process of cannabis having to be, you know, worked for many years to kind of move the needle to where it is now, it has paved the way in a certain way for this next issue of the mushrooms and other natural plants. And similar, they're totally different things, but what is similar is that there's like many different kinds of mushrooms with different components and qualities, and people have different individual systems, and that matchup of certain things seems to make a difference in these treatments and stuff. And whenever it's decriminalized or legalized, more of those options become available, and the ability for people to be able to treat themselves with the right thing is easier. And meanwhile, it's, you know, as long as people are being responsible, which they can be with it, you know, adults should choose whether or not they want to use mushrooms, whether it's a micro dose for a little energy boost or health or peace of mind or however that works for people, or to actually take a trip for whatever reason responsibly.
Just for the cannabis thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Colin. You finish up with mushrooms.
Did you want me to talk about the event that's coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
do.
so it's not Decriminalized Nature Ann Arbor. So it's the Michigan Psychedelic Society is hosting their monthly meeting, and it's going to be at Argo Park in Ann Arbor, and it's called Psychedelic Storytelling. And you have to wear a mask and sit 6 feet apart from everyone. If you'd want to share a story, I'm going to share a story. You can go to Michigan Psychedelics. You can send an email to Michigan Psychedelic Society at gmail.com, and it's from 6:30 to 8:30 at Argo Park again.
So testimonials, which is also how we
Yeah.
help move the cannabis issue forward.
You know, from 2008 to 2018, essentially, there were no legal cannabis retail establishments in Michigan, but yet we moved the needle of acceptance in the community for that industry a great deal because of the gray market or the black market industry that we had. We set the standard of quality and safety, and it really took a lot of people off guard. And by the time 2018 came around, many of those people that had been on the fence now believed our industry was ready to go.
I agree. Went from that questionable and felonious activity, especially in areas where they really wanted to enforce laws against it, to an essential service during the pandemic as a barometer for how far we've come.
And again, we talked about Michael Thomas earlier. There are still people incarcerated. You know, Danny Trevino. When you start, there's a list of names you could start mentioning. People that can't be forgotten, that we have to continue to work to get out of jail, because again, no one should go to jail for a plant. And Michael Thomas's sentence was cruel and inhumane for what actually happened. And so is
Absolutely agree.
Trevino's, actually, as far as I'm concerned.
And so it'll be made public, and Zahra Abbas will be on Planet Green Trees on Thursday night as representing the Democratic Cannabis Caucus, and we'll describe a letter that is being sent to the Attorney General that is about this very thing, including Michael Thompson and that type of those type of issues that persist. And also a letter is being sent to the governor as this new caucus reforms. But to get the ball rolling, that's how it's getting started. So we'll hear more about that Thursday night, 8 o'clock on Planet Green Trees TV.
There are some notable names signed onto that letter, some organizations here from the state that people will recognize. But that's an important aspect of activism. We've said for a long time, this is not over. Nobody quits. Everybody fights. This is not done. Just because we won an election in 2018 didn't mean that everything was going to be perfect from here on out.
Yeah, so Nick, I'm glad you're still here because I'll throw another one in here. We are continuously working against some of the bigger investors, the bigger resourceful organizations and individuals and companies in this industry trying to kind of artificially corner, pieces of the market for themselves. Instead of there being more opportunity for more people, there's always this attempt to try to make something more restrictive or prohibitive, even for people operating in the licensed world, and just attempt to take over. It started off even as early as 2010.
I did mention a name. Is that I don't know if you remember the name that I mentioned.
I do. I remember that name.
One of those that you're referring to, or are they?
I don't know, and they could be. It doesn't mean that they're evil. There's a lot of people who understand how our system works in reality and are very good at working those systems and processes and making money on a big level, and
I just think they did stuff around. So the presentation I saw in downtown Clarkston, I thought they did a good job of trying to bring a product into a community that normally wouldn't accept it when they talk about it being a boutique, and that you wouldn't be allowed into the facility without checking an ID first. And that was the pushback, was where people were like, what about the children? They're going to walk in front of it. Meanwhile, the next block, there's a party store where they have a wall of booze, so to me, the pushback is not legit because.
Sure. And as Rick pointed out, you can now, there's been 10 years of dispensaries working just fine in communities that accept them and have worked with them that you can point to as an example of what happens.
That's typically what you described is what happened in every single city when we first entered the city. Yep. It was always, what about the kids? What about the this? What about the that? And it's very easy to say, this is the facts. This is no problem. This hasn't had an issue in another community. You can point it out, but that's a well-trod road. We've heard all those stories, all those excuses.
Marijuana Regulatory Agency has strict restrictions over what you can put in the front window of your establishment too. You cannot display product. You cannot have illustrations that you can't have.
Labels can't be attractive to kids.
Yeah,
exactly.
Lots of things in place for that.
There's many stair steps that they've taken to make sure that children aren't in danger.
And when you have a store where you require ID, you reduce the chances of the kids being able to get it. Just like a kid can't walk into a liquor store and buy cigarettes and liquor right now.
Well, you cannot walk into a dispensary.
They're what they are concerned about. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. What they're concerned about are the facilities in operation that aren't licensed and they're not paying their taxes. They're hoping to close some of those loopholes.
I believe those have all been closed down. So
yeah, and it's and that there might be something to be said for that. Now, personally, I don't mind any of that activity at all. I think the pie is pretty big. It's just cannabis. Who really cares? But it's true that under the system, without a license, for those who are jumping through all these hoops, paying all this money, they take a little, issue with that. The distinction for me, for sure, though, is those places, when being looked at for being shut down, don't have to be shut down by way of like paramilitary invasions and raids. It can be done civilly. If they don't shut down by telling them to shut down, a lock can be put on that door and that building can be shut down for up to a year without any of that other crap.
You can use a nuisance rule instead of a SWAT team raid. But I have to say, considering where you're talking about, Clarkston, the middle of Oakland County, I can't imagine that there are any
Yeah, like a blind pig
Unlicensed.
for
Oh,
cannabis
no,
or
this-
something.
This
And this would be
No,
better.
just at
You could
large, like the
argue
clubs
that
in
and say,
Flint or Detroit or something like that. She means.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. These don't exist in where I
Yeah.
live.
Okay.
They were out of town, but I'm just like that's who they're focusing on when they're reaching out to lawmakers. They want these because they're paying their taxes. They're paying a lot of money to have a facility that's pleasant to the eye, and moving into these more conservative neighborhoods. So they just are, I guess they're carving out their space a little more clearly, I guess. But
Let me just put in focus, since you are a candidate for office, let me just give you an alternate philosophy on that. Okay. Those people entered into an industry where the existing businesses you're talking about were already existent. They are trying to push out people that have already been there before they were there. So if a community has tolerated those industries for a long time and a new guy comes in and says, hey, I don't think we should tolerate them anymore, you should probably look at that guy and say, shut up. Okay. Because the fact is, they've got plenty of advantage already over the 1 or 2 or 3 operations that are going, especially in Genesee County. It seems like those people came into a situation where they knew what the rules were. They already knew what was going on beforehand, and now they're trying to change the rules and change the circumstances.
Well, it's also an exposure of their lack of understanding of kind of what's going on. This pie is big enough for all that stuff. They can concentrate, instead of worrying about that stuff, on providing the product at a high quality, at a good price, competitively, and work their own thing and do much better than worrying about this other stuff. But they do.
They're opening, I don't know if it's already open, but they opened a recreational facility in East Lansing.
Lots of great progress going on.
Which is a great location. So that was a good.
Yeah, that is a good spot.
So
they're working it professionally. The problem is there's like Green Peak, who owns, I think they're like one of the biggest in the state, and they came in similarly without real understanding of the culture and the nature of the plant, and made some really stupid decisions.
Yeah, a lot of blunders, public blunders, and they tried to walk stuff back, and it's too late. And
I've read in Marijuana Business Daily the other day, a company called Red, White, and Bloom claims that they own 22% of Michigan's cannabis market already. One company, wow. 22%. Now that's the people that have talked about selling them to High Times for the new branded cannabis stores they're going to open. But that's frightening.
They're just going to sell CBD or something?
So they're going to sell CBD things carried over from their Illinois facility, but it looks like they're also going to seek medical and adult use licenses in the state of Michigan, which is the only business model that works. A CBD only store, even with High Times name on it, that's going to be a tough business to keep afloat.
I would say so. That's a hobby business. You're not going to go any further with it, I believe.
Right. And CBD is so saturated within the market itself.
Yep.
If you're exclusively that product line, I think you're really in trouble as far as a business model goes. Diversifying, definitely. Especially considering the huge financial upside of being able to get a medical or an adult use license in Michigan.